Hello grade 12s and welcome to our lesson on business sectors. This section of work does not have a lot of theory to remember, but when you are examined, you will usually be required to identify either the business sector or the business environment. And in addition to this, you will usually be asked to develop potential strategies that will be used to solve any challenges that arise either in the business environments or from the business sectors. So let's take a closer look at what you need to know by the end of this section of work. By the time you have completed this section of work, you will need to know the following. You will need to know the types of business sectors, which includes the primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors. You will also need to know the business environments, which consist of the micro, market, and macro environments. You will need to be able to explain the extent of control that the business has in each of the environments I've just mentioned. Then, you'll also need to be able to identify and explain some challenges that the business might face in each of the environments. And then finally, you will need to be able to come up with possible strategies or solutions for the challenges that the business might face in each of the different environments. Let's get started with today's lesson by looking at the business sectors, which include the primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors. The primary sector mainly deals with the extraction of raw materials and natural resources from the earth. The term natural resources is an indication that all the raw materials that are extracted are not man-made. They are provided for by the earth. The activities that take place in the primary sector include fishing, farming or agriculture, forestry, and mining. The secondary sector is responsible for converting all the raw materials into finished goods that will be used by businesses as well as the public. These raw materials that are used in the process of converting raw materials into finished goods come from the primary sector. Examples of activities that take place in the secondary sector include, amongst others, car or vehicle manufacturing, the manufacturing of bread or fruit or food products, the manufacturing of clothing or textiles, and the manufacturing of cool drinks or drinks. These are only a few examples of some of the manufacturing that takes place in the secondary sector. There are many, many more examples. The tertiary sector is also referred to as the services sector, and the purpose of the tertiary sector is to render all services to public as well as the businesses. So services will be rendered to individuals as well as the businesses. Services in this sector include, amongst others, hairdressing or hairdressers, teachers, garden services, and dentistry. There are obviously a lot more services available in the tertiary sector, for example, healthcare services, legal services, insurance services, and so on, but these are only a few that I have explained here. All three sectors depend on each other. That's why we say they are interdependent of each other. The primary sector provides the resources needed to produce the goods in the secondary sector. The demand created in the tertiary sector will determine how many products are extracted in the primary sector. The secondary sector will use the resources produced from the primary sector to produce the goods and services that will then be sold to the customers or to other businesses in the tertiary sector. So therefore, all three sectors rely on each other in order to operate efficiently. So that concludes the section on business sectors, which was primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors. We will now move on to looking at the business environments. So in this section, you will be required to know the three business environments as well as the level of control that the business has over these three environments. So let's take a look at these three business environments, which include the micro, market, and the macro environment. The business environments consist of the micro environment, the market environment, and the macro environment. Now, the micro environment is the business itself. It is everything and everyone inside the business. Therefore, when it comes to the level of control that the business has in the micro environment, it should make sense that the business has full control and full influence over all people and everything that is inside the business. The market environment is considered to be the market or the environment just outside the business and consists of your customers or consumers, your competitors, your intermediaries, your suppliers, and so on. Now, in the market environment, the business has no control or has very limited control over those mentioned a few moments ago. However, the business will need to try and exert influence over the other components of the market environment. So the business cannot control its customers, it cannot control its suppliers or competitors or intermediaries, but they can try and influence their suppliers, their customers, their competitors, and their intermediaries. So when it comes to the level of control of the market environment, there's no control or very little control, but they can try to influence the other components of the market environment. Then finally, we have the macro environment, where the business will have no influence at all, and the business will completely have to be reactive to anything that takes place. So with any macro environment event that takes place, such as the coronavirus, the business cannot influence, it has no control, and will have to react and come up with solutions to face these challenges. Now, when it comes to challenges within each of the environments, some of the challenges that exist in the micro environment, so inside the business, include difficult employees, a lack of a vision or mission statement, a lack of management skills, strikes or go slows, and so on. When it comes to challenges that may exist in the market environment, it may be challenges in terms of competition, shortages of supply. You have to look at the different challenges when it comes to the demographics or psychographics of customers. And you also have to look at social cultural factors, because there will be many different small challenges within each of those. And the business will have to try and address these issues, because the business cannot control them, but will have to try and influence them or see how the business is influenced by them and come up with a strategy to minimize the impact on the business. Then when it comes to the macro challenges, it could be things like labor legislations that change, contemporary legislations that change, political changes, socioeconomic issues, interest rate changes, global pandemics like the coronavirus, and even changes in income levels of customers. And the business will have no control here and will have to try and react to the changes that are taking place to minimize the negative impact of all these changes on the business, and also take advantage of positive impacts on the business. For example, at the moment, the interest rate has dropped quite a bit, which means that the loans that the business will have will be, or the monthly repayments on the loans will be a lot less, which means the business can use that money elsewhere, or even put that into paying back the loans so they can pay it back in a quicker time period. To see how this section of work is tested, let's take a look at a question from one of the previous Matric past papers. Let's take a look at how the question is asked, how it should be answered, and how it will be marked. When answering questions, it's important to read the entire scenario and then look at the questions to see exactly what is required of you. When looking at the questions, see how many things you need to identify and how many things you need to answer in each question. Sometimes the question will ask for one thing, sometimes it will ask for two things, or sometimes it will ask for three or more things. So make a note, underline exactly what needs to be done in the question, so that when you're answering it, you're answering the question fully. Some people try to rush through the questions and then they don't answer all the aspects of the questions. So let's get started by looking at the scenario and then the questions, and then tackle the questions. And we'll also have a look and see how the questions are marked. But what's important is for you to look at the mark allocation, because the mark allocation will also be an indication to you as to how you should be answering these questions. ZFit Clothing Pty Limited, and then ZF in brackets. So when referring to this business, they will be referring to ZF. So whenever they ask about ZF, they're asking about ZFit Clothing. So ZFit Clothing Pty Limited specializes in the manufacturing of fitness wear. Lycra & Company is based in China. In the past year, import duties were increased. ZF is also experiencing a decrease in demand for their products as less people are buying fitness wear. ZF is owned by two brothers for the past 15 years, and their motto is "Our business, our rules." Okay, so that's the entire scenario. You need to try and make sense of what's going on. So we're looking at ZFit Clothing Pty Limited. We manufacture items of clothing and we import goods from Lycra & Company, which is based in China. Okay, so let's take a look at the questions. Identify the sector that ZF operates in and motivate your answer. So here we have to identify which sector, so that's primary, secondary and tertiary sector, and motivate the answer, and the question is worth 3 marks. So the first thing we have to do is identify the sector that ZF operates in and then motivate our answer. So there are 2 things we need to do: identify the sector and then motivate our answer, our reason for choosing that particular sector, and that's worth 3 marks. Okay, let's look at the scenario to see if we can find any information there. So it says ZFit specializes in the manufacturing of fitness wear. So there we can see from that line, we manufacture, as ZFit manufactures the products, therefore they must be in the secondary sector. And our reason for that is because the article or the text is telling us they manufacture fitness wear. So that's going to be our answer over there. So remember, we need to say 2 things. We need to say which sector it is part of, so secondary sector. And why do we say secondary sector? Because ZF specializes in manufacturing fitness wear, and we said that is worth 3 marks. So when the marks are allocated, it will be 2 marks for identifying the sector correctly and 1 mark for giving the reasons. So that will be the 3 marks for that particular question. Okay, then looking at question 2, it says quote 3 challenges from the scenario that ZF is facing. So that's the first thing we have to do. Then we have to match the identified challenge with the specific environment, and thirdly, discuss the extent of control that ZF has as the business. So there's 3 things we have to identify, or 3 things we have to do here. Firstly, identify 3 challenges from the scenario. Secondly, match those identified challenges with the specific business environment. And then thirdly, mention the level of control that the business has in each of those environments. Now, what you need to know when they ask a question like this, have a look and see if they give you a table. So here they have given a table and they said redraw this table. So if they tell you to redraw the table, then you redraw the table as you see it here and you fill the answers into that table. So when we look at this type of question, there is most likely going to be a challenge from the micro environment, the macro environment, and the market environment. So when answering this question, before identifying the challenges, go ahead and look at the text, see if you can identify the challenges, and then when you identify the challenge, also see if you can link at that point, where does it belong? Does it belong in the micro environment, the market environment, or the macro environment? So looking at the information, it says that Z-Fit Clothing specializes in the manufacturing of fitness wear. Lycra and companies based in China. In the past, import duties were increased. So in the past year, import duties were increased. So that will be linked to the market environment. Then ZF is also experiencing a decrease in demand for their products as less people are buying fitness wear. So there's a second challenge. The first challenge over there is the import duties. The second one is less people are buying fitness wear. And then the third one is ZF is owned by two brothers, and their management motto is our business, our rules. So the management motto there is the challenge, and that's going to be a micro challenge. Why is it a challenge? Because if you look at the motto, it says our business, our rules. Now, if you look at the motto from the perspective of the customer, it looks like everything is about the owners. The people will not be inspired to buy from that place because it's our business, our rules. Everything is geared towards the owners of the business. So it doesn't look very favorable in the eyes of the customers. Therefore, that is a challenge. And that is going to be the micro environment challenge. Okay, so when you answer the question, we said that we have to ensure that we draw the table as we saw it. And then before you put in the challenges, just put in the environment. So you can say micro environment, market environment, and the macro environment. Again, before putting in the challenges, you can already explain the level of control that the business has in each of these environments. So in the micro environment, you should know that the business has full control and full influence. Because as we mentioned previously, the microenvironment is the business itself. So the business has control of everything and everyone in the business. Then in the market environment, there is no control, or there's limited control, but the business can try to influence the other components of the market environment. And then in the macro environment, there is no control and no influence. So here the business has no control and no influence. They have to completely react to the challenge of this particular environment. Okay, so we've highlighted the environment. So when we go back and look at the text, we'll see that the micro environment was the management motto. And when we look at the question said, quote. So therefore our answer must be in inverted commas, and we take the text directly from the text. So you could also write out the full sentences. Management motto is our business, our rules, but the management motto is the keyword that we're looking for here. And then in the market environment, less people are buying fitness wear is what we identified. So we write less people are buying fitness wear. And then in the macro environment, we said that import duties were increased. Okay, so there we have our challenges. What's important here is that your challenge that you identified is linked to the correct environment, and that environment is linked to the correct extent of control. So when we mark this work, you're going to get 1 mark for quoting each of the challenges. You will get 2 marks for identifying the environment correctly, and you will get 2 marks for explaining the extent of control. So there's your 15 marks that are awarded for this particular question. Then the final question says, suggest a strategy that the business can employ to overcome each of the challenges. And it's 6 marks. So it's going to be 2 marks per strategy, and you have to come up with a strategy for, it says, each of the 3 challenges. So you're going to have to come up with a strategy for the micro, market, and macro environment when answering this particular question. So you're going to have to come up with one potential strategy for each of the sectors, or for each of the environments. And it's important to understand that your strategy is a possible solution or a possible strategy. So as long as it is feasible or it sounds like it could possibly work, you will be rewarded with the necessary marks. So in our micro, macro, and market environment, we identified the management motto as the micro challenge. So what we could possibly do there is see what the problem is. The problem is that customers don't look favorably upon that motto of our business, our rules. So therefore what we could do is we could change the motto so that it looks more favorable to the customers, because that will motivate them to want to come and buy from the business. For the second one, the market environment challenge, less people are buying fitness wear. So now we need to ask ourselves, how do we encourage people to buy more fitness wear? And we could do this by offering promotions or specials which will discount the price and might motivate customers to come and buy from us. And the last one is import duties have increased. So it means that the cost of producing the item is more expensive because it's costing us more money to import the goods from China. So what do? We could then look for a local supplier, which means we eliminate the import duties completely. So that could be the 3 solutions. So let's document that answer. So in the micro environment, we said the management motto was the problem. So we could change the motto so that it looks more favorable to the customer. For the market challenge, we said that the market challenge there was less people are buying fitness wear, so we could run specials or promotions to encourage customers to buy goods at a discounted price. And the last one there is increase in import duties. We said that we could look for a local supplier. And what will that do? Finding a local supplier means we're going to eliminate import duties entirely. Okay. Now when it comes to marking this work, you're going to get 1 mark for saying what you are doing, what your solution is, and 1 mark for motivating why you're going to implement that solution. So in the micro environment, changing the motto is the solution. Why are we changing the motto? So it can look more favorable to the customers. So the marks will be split in answering this particular question. For the market environment, what's the solution? Running specials or promotions. Why do we want to run specials or promotion? To encourage customers to buy goods at a discount price. And the last one is look for local supplier. Why do we want to look for a local supplier? To eliminate import duties entirely. And that will be the 6 marks for the 3 possible strategies. Remember, it's possible strategies, so anything that you can come up that makes sense, you will get the answer, or you'll get the marks for that. But when you're coming up with solutions or strategies, the marks will always be split. So explain what your strategy is and why you implement that strategy or why it will work. Although we have not mentioned it, it's important to know that business strategies, another section of work we've already completed, is often linked to this section of work. For example, they might ask you to develop an intensive strategy or a diversification strategy and so on in order to solve a particular challenge. So grade 12, that brings us to the end of today's lesson on business sectors. I hope you understood everything that we went through today, and I hope that you have a wonderful day further. Until we see each other next time again, bye-bye.